Well, let's see. Bachelor number one is a successful photographer who got his start when his father found him in the dark room at the age of 13, fully developed. Between takes, he might find him skydiving or motorcycling. Please welcome Rodney Alcala. Rod, welcome.
On September the 13th of 1978, this was a very ordinary, normal Wednesday for most people. But for Cheryl Bradshaw, this day would go on to be one of the craziest days of her life. Cheryl Bradshaw, she would appear as a bachelorette on a TV dating show called The Dating Game. On this TV show, she would choose her bachelor, number one, Rodney Alcala. Little would Cheryl know that she was staring in the eyes of pure evil, because Rodney Alcala would later be revealed as a vicious serial killer. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, or welcome to my channel if you're new here. I hope you're all doing so well. Welcome back to another true crime and makeup episode. Today we are covering a very highly requested case, and even more highly requested since Netflix released the show The Woman of the Hour. We are covering the case of the dating game killer, Rodney Alcala. Now, if you are new here, hi, my name is Anna. I am a certified yapper and one day decided to come on the internet, yap about true crime, find a community of people who were interested in the same things as me, and I think I found you. So if true crime is your thing, I highly suggest you subscribe, because I am here twice a week, every single week on Wednesday and Sunday. Please make sure you are subscribed with the notification bell on. Leave a comment down below to help boost that algorithm, even if it's just an emoji, if it's a comment on the case, whatever you want to talk about, I'm so game. But without any further rambling and any further ado, let's get into the case of Rodney Alcala, the dating game murderer. Now listen, I'm making no promises, right? But I am thinking, pondering, perchance, I might actually do like a little Halloween vibe makeup today. I'm always a bit like, it doesn't really sit right talking about like murder and doing like a Halloween makeup. But at the same time, I was like, Anna, be so for real, like we're halfway there, in the words of Bon Jovi. We're doing makeup anyway, so why not make it a bit spooky for the spooky season? But I'm not going to go like full out. I'm thinking like we do a normal makeup look and then add a bit of spook to the end, okay? Now I have to say, this Rodney Alcala guy, right, his hair. Maybe it was the vibe back then. In fact, I'm pretty sure it was the vibe back then, but he looks like he is trying very hard to be like the long lost member of Aerosmith. And if we want to go one step further, tell me why this guy looks like Charles Ingalls out of Little House on the Prairie. I'd say I'm showing my age, but I'm not. I was just brought up watching Little House on the Prairie. And he very much gives Charles Ingalls, apart from, you know, less kind and more evil and just a despicable human being, whereas Charles Ingalls was a really great guy. But anyway, I digress. This case isn't about Charles Ingalls. So Rodney Alcala, he was actually born Rodrigo Jacques Alcala, and he was born on August the 23rd of 1943. Now, his birthday is just one day before my little sister's. Obviously, she wasn't born in 1943, but she's August the 24th, he's August the 23rd. Should I be worried? Possibly. Little Rod, he was born in San Antonio, Texas to Mexican-American parents. His father was Raul Alcala Buquar. I don't know. And his mother was Ana Maria Gutierrez, which I love Mexican names. They're so pretty. 1951, Raul, Rodney's father, he decides that he should move the family over to Mexico so they can have like this fresh, new, happy life together. So he moves his family over to Mexico and then he abandons them 3 years later, just leaving them in Mexico. And listen, I don't know why he abandoned his family. Maybe he caught a glimpse of the future of who Rodney Alcala might turn out to be. But, you know, to move your family across state and then bow out, no great. Then in 1954, when Rodney was just 11 years old, Ana Maria, she decided to move Rodney and his two sisters Yeah, I failed to mention that he has sisters, but yeah, he has 2 sisters. But she decided to move them to suburban Los Angeles for a new fresh start. Now, I have to say, Rodney Alcala, he was deemed to be very bright, very smart, very intellectually gifted by his peers, his teachers, his mother, his siblings. Everyone around him could see the great potential he could have. And in life, he could probably have went on to be anything he wanted to and do anything that he wanted to. But unfortunately, the things that Rodney Alcala wanted to do would not be legal and they would not be very nice. So, not great. Not only was Rodney very gifted academically and did well in school, but he was also really popular in school as well. I mean, he really just seemed to get on with everyone. That included his peers and his teachers. No one really had too much of a bad word to say about him, but it could be a bit strange. But we're all a bit strange somewhere. Now, Rodney, he would attend multiple different private schools throughout his youth, and then he would go on to graduate from Cantwell Sacred Heart of Mary High School. At this high school, he had been on the yearbook planning committee, and he was also on the track team and the cross country team. So again, it just shows he's kind of good at everything. Academically smart, he's good at sports, and apparently he's good at yearbook planning. He's an all-rounder. So 1961 rolls around and Rodney Alcala, he decides at the age of 17 he wants to join the United States Army to become a paratrooper, and he would serve as a cleric throughout his time. I have to say, it would be during his time in the army when some of his less savoury characteristics and personality traits would really come to light and make themselves known to people. Alcala's commanding officer, he had said that Alcala was vindictive, he was manipulative, he was insubordinate, so basically not obeying rules and orders and stuff like that, and he would also be disciplined on several occasions for assaulting young women. That sounds like a police report to me, but let's just keep going. So then we're heading into the territory of 1964, and Rodney Alcala, he would suffer from a nervous breakdown basically, and he went absent without leave from the army. So he hitchhikes from South Carolina to his mother's in California, no telling anyone where he's going, he just takes off. Now, once he was, tracked down and deemed to be safe, the army psychiatrists, they would do a psych evaluation on Rodney to see what's going on. And this is when he would be diagnosed with antisocial personality disorder, and also during this psychiatric evaluation, they would measure his IQ as 135. 135, and correct me if I'm wrong because I doubt my IQ's that high, but that's smart. Is that smart? Or is that average? Is that average? I don't know, right? But it seemed important. Because Rodney Alcala's mental health just seemed to be on the downward spiral, it was just deteriorating by the day, he would be medically discharged from the army. So obviously with this, he's well, I need to find purpose, I need to do something. And since he was very much intelligent, he would go on to graduate from UCLA, the School of Fine Arts. He would then go on to study film under Roman Polanski in New York. I'll admit, everything at this moment in time seems to be quite positive, right? It seems as though he's getting his life together, he's trying to achieve things, he's studying hard. But under that greasy hair and under that charming surface was a monster who was just waiting to attack. And this would bring us to September the 25th of 1968. A young girl by the name of Tali Shapiro, she would be only 8 years old when she had to look pure evil in the eye. On September the 25th of 1968, 8-year-old Tali Shapiro, she was walking to school from the Chateau Marmont Hotel in Los Angeles, where her family had been staying for a little bit. And on this walk, she would be approached by a man, Rodney Alcala. Rodney Alcala, he starts telling 8-year-old Tali that he knew her parents really well, he was really good friends with them, and if she would like, he can give her a ride to school, and that would be okay because he knows her parents. Now, Tally at first, she is very much thinking, no way, like I don't want a lift from you, I'm more than happy to walk from school, thank you for the offer, but no thanks, creep. Now, unfortunately, Alcala, he was very persistent and almost demanding that he gives Tally a ride to school. He keeps informing her, you know, I know your parents, like your parents would want me to give you a ride to school. They wouldn't want you going with a stranger when you can come with their old pal Rodney. And he keeps talking to Tally, and Tally's like sort of warming to the idea. And then he tells Tally that he is a professional photographer, and if she would like, she could come over to his apartment before school to see some of the cool like posters and photographs that he's done. And Tally agrees. So both Tally and Rodney, they arrive at his apartment, and Tally would follow Rodney inside. Now, almost immediately, once she enters through that apartment door, Rodney Alcala would knock her out unconscious with a metal bar. Rodney Alcala, he then proceeds to bludgeon Tally's head with this metal bar, before then raping her. This little girl, let me remind you, she is 8 years old, and this grown man is raping her. Now, what this pathetic lowlife didn't realise is in the area at that time, there was a sales representative by the name of Donald Haynes. Now, he witnessed this whole interaction of Rodney Alcala taking Tally Shapiro into his apartment. And immediately he was concerned because Rodney Alcala was acting very inappropriately with this young girl. So he follows them toward the apartment to see exactly where they go, and he contacted the police. Thankfully, the police, they arrive quite quickly and they force entry into Rodney Alcala's apartment. Now, when they force entry, they would find 8-year-old Tally Shapiro unconscious, lying in a pool of her own blood. They then seen Rodney Alcala flee out the back door, but because there wasn't enough police there at that point, they had to decide, do they save this little 8-year-old girl's life, or do they go after Rodney Alcala? And in that moment, the police made the split-second decision to save Tally Shapiro's life. I am so glad they chose to save Tally's life. Like, she was an 8-year-old little girl, and a lot of people online, they do say, well, if the police had got him then, maybe he wouldn't have got out, blah, 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 blah. This is just not true because, you know, just wait till we get into the story, but I am glad that little girl's life was saved. Now, Tally Shapiro, even though her life was saved, she would have a long road of recovery ahead of her. She was in a coma for 32 days, and then she had to spend months recovering from the physical injuries, never mind how long it took for the mental injuries that she had sustained with the trauma that she would have to live with. Now, I have to say, Tally Shapiro's story with Rodney Alcala, it's not finished, but we are going to come back to that toward the end. You'll be happy to know nothing else like happens to her from Rodney Alcala, but she becomes a crucial part of this story. So after fleeing the apartment, Rodney Alcala, he decides, like, I need to get the heck out of Dodge, I need to get myself elsewhere so the police can't find me. So he heads to New York and he would enroll at NYU, and for his enrollment, he went under the name of John Berger. In 1971, he obtains a job at a New Hampshire arts camp for children, and he goes under a slightly different alias, John Berger. Innovative, love that. And I mean, it is fitting because Rodney Alcala, he does look as though he styles his hair with burger grease, so it makes sense, but it's like John Berger to John Berger, like, make a bit of effort. And what's crazy is around this time, Alcala, he would work in an office with another serial killer by the name of Richard Cottenham. Now, Richard Cottenham, he was nicknamed the Torso Killer and also the Times Square Ripper. Both of these men, they did later say that they didn't actually know each other. They never spoke to each other. They weren't in cahoots. They never knew that each one was a serial killer. You know, they just worked together. Cornelia Crilly, she would be just 23 years old when she would be found raped and murdered in her Manhattan apartment on June the 12th of 1971. At this point in Cornelia's life, she was truly just living her best life, achieving her dreams. She worked as a Trans World Airlines flight attendant. And of course, working as a flight attendant, that meant she was getting to travel all over, see loads of different places. Her mother and father, they were both very successful, which did help open doors for Cornelia, but ultimately, she was successful in her own right. She was a very, very hard worker. And Cornelia was just living this really happy life. She was in a happy relationship with her successful prosecutor boyfriend, Leon Borstein. They were just so in love, and the heartache that her death would cause Leon is just heartbreaking. Cornelia, she was known to be extremely sociable. One day when she suddenly just goes off the radar, absolute radio silence, people immediately get concerned because that is not like Cornelia. She stays in touch with the people she cares about, friends, family, or boyfriend. So it just seemed really off that they hadn't heard from her. Not to make it all about me, right? But see, if that was me in that case, no one would even know I'm missing because I am the worst, texter you will ever meet. And her loved ones, they're so concerned that they contact the police and they request a welfare check on her. The police, they go over to Cornelia's apartment, which is 427 on 83rd Street in Manhattan. Cornelia's boyfriend, Leon, he was waiting outside whilst the police went in to do their welfare check. Once the police forced their way into Cornelia's apartment, that is where they would find her dead. She had been brutally raped and then strangled with her own nylon stockings. Now the police, they go outside to Leon and they tell him what they've found, and Leon, of course, is breaking his heart. He is devastated that the person he loves the most is dead. The police say that they need someone to make a formal identification of Cornelia, but Leon refused to do this, and he refused to do this because he said he could not cope with that being the last memory he had of his girlfriend Cornelia. And it's just awful, but Cornelia's case went cold very, very quickly, and it would go unsolved for decades until the 2000s. Now, in this period of time, Leon, he was sort of thought of as the main person of interest. They thought he could have been the murderer. Charges were never brought because there was never any evidence because he didn't do it. But because the police had sort of made it known to the family that they were looking at Leon, Cornelia's family completely distanced themselves from him. And this just left Leon feeling like the worst human being in the world. The family of the person he loved has completely disowned him, believing that he could have potentially done this to their daughter. The police, they had previously found Tali Shapiro in Alcala's apartment, so ultimately they knew who they were looking for, and the FBI in early 1971, they would put Alcala on their top 10 most wanted list. Posters had been distributed throughout the communities. They were in stores, grocery stores, places like that, and two children that were attending the arts camp, they seen this poster. And they recognised the man in that poster. But they recognised him as John Berger. This was saying Rodney Alcala. Police, they are quickly made aware that people know where Alcala is, and they would immediately arrest him and extradite him back to California. And I cannot even prepare you for how infuriating this case is going to get. But Tali Shapiro and her family, they had moved over to Mexico. They were trying to get a fresh start. They were trying to find a safe place where Tali Shapiro could recuperate, try and get her life back on track, try to heal from the trauma that she endured. So when the police came to Tali and her family, her parents refused to let her testify against this monster. They did not want to reopen these wounds that they were also desperately trying to heal. The authorities, they refused to charge Alcala with rape and attempted murder because they didn't have any primary witnesses. The 8-year-old girl who endured this monstrous trauma. So they decide that they're going to charge him with child molestation, and he would only get 3 years in prison. How is this right? Even on the child molestation charge, that should carry so much more weight for a sentence. 3 years for this POS paedophile who's targeting young children. 3 years. What? And let me tell you guys, if your clams are not steamed right now, they're about to be, right? 17 months later, 17 months into Alcala's sentence, he is paroled. Yep, paroled. So, he's walking free. Just 2 months later, he's rearrested because he sexually assaulted a 13-year-old girl. Now, he would only serve a further 2 years for this, being paroled again in 1976. I honestly don't even know what to say. What do they think this guy's going to do? Like, do they think he's going to get out and be like a great citizen, get a job, settle down, have a wife, have a family, be a provider? Hell, nah. This man is a monster. So now 1997 comes around, right? And Alcala's parole officer, and I'll use that term lightly because what kind of parole officer does this? But he permitted Alcala to travel to New York to visit relatives. He's permitting this guy to fly from California to New York. He's a flight risk. He is a repeat offender. But sure, let him go visit relatives who he's not actually going to go see. Just 7 days into this trip, surprise, surprise, he strikes again, and he would murder a college student by the name of Elaine Hover. So Elaine Hover, she was last seen at her New York apartment on July the 15th of 1977, and her date book that she kept in her flat, that showed an appointment that she had penciled in with a photographer by the name of John Berger. John Berger. Sounds familiar. Now, later on that same year, 1977, FBI, they would receive a tip regarding Alcala about his attack on Tali Shapiro and that maybe he should be questioned in this. Yep, okay. At this point, I'm thinking, they're doing their work, they're doing their research, this is looking good, let's get him caught. But they would question Alcala, okay? And Rodney Alcala, he's like, I mean, yeah, I knew Elaine, but that was as far as it went. Like, I didn't see her, I didn't murder her. And because Elaine's body hadn't been found, police couldn't do any testing to link him to the crimes. So ultimately he was let go. Later, buried under heavy rocks on a hillside near Hudson River, Elaine's body would be found. Now, when it got out that Elaine had went to meet this, John Berger guy, an aspiring model came forward and she said that she had been photographed by said John Berger and that he was a wee bit of a weirdo. So now we jump forward to 1978 and Rodney Alcala at this point, he is working for the Los Angeles Times and he would soon be interviewed by the Hillside Strangler task force team because they were thinking, maybe, just maybe, he was the Hillside Strangler. But of course, after the actual captures of the Hillside Stranglers, he was ruled out. So Alcala, he is like carrying on this false life of his, pretending that he's this high fashion, high regarded fashion photographer. And he would manipulate a lot of young women and young men to allow him to take their photos. And a lot of these photos, they would be nude, they would be fully naked, these young men and women posing very suggestively. But he's a professional photographer, so it's okay. That's how they were thinking and feeling. And now the part that you're all probably waiting for, because of course Rodney Alcala is known as the dating game killer, despite not killing on a dating game, but that's what he's known for. So it's 1978. Lord knows how Rodney Alcala gets selected to go on a really popular dating TV show called The Dating Game. I guess these people don't do background checks because they're having a literal child molester on their TV show. But who am I to say? So Alcala, on this TV show, he was introduced as a very successful photographer who in between takes could be found motorcycling or skydiving. Bitch, where? Be so for real, he can be found killing and targeting young women. Now, other bachelors on this TV show, they had said that Alcala was a very strange man who gave very off vibes, he had really bizarre opinions, and all around, he just made them feel uncomfortable. Now, somehow, again, listen, I don't know how it was done. I don't know if it was a bouncy blow dry that he had on the game show or that creepy smile that he's got, but he won the show, ultimately winning him a date with the Bachelorette, Cheryl Bradshaw.
Oh, come on, over here.
Cheryl and Rodney, they're talking backstage, getting to know each other, you know, planning out their date. Cheryl feels this very intense feeling of something being wrong with this man in front of her. She was creeped out. He was a complete, utter weirdo saying some really weird stuff. And she decides that she doesn't want to pursue the date with Alcala. So she cuts contact, which must have bruised his ego. He thinks that he's a ladies' man. And this would just shatter any psychopath's ego. But Cheryl had said she just wouldn't have felt safe going on a date with this man, and rightly so, because it is believed had Cheryl went out with Rodney Alcala, she might have ended up being one of his victims. Like, how scary is that, to know that you've stood and spoke with a serial killer and you could potentially have been one of their victims? Whoa. Now, just a little thing to remember is he had said to Cheryl whilst on the game show, the best time is at night. And, you know, we're going to get into it. You'll see. You will see.
Bachelor number 1.
Yes?
What's your best time?
The best time is at night. Nighttime.
Why do you say that?
Because that's the only time there is.
The only time? What's wrong with morning, afternoon?
Well, they're okay, but nighttime's when it really gets good. Then you're really ready.
Alcala, you know, he's feeling all battered and bruised. His ego's been shattered by this woman on the game show, and he just needs to relieve his stress and also make a point and claim what he believes he is entitled to. He's going to go on a killing spree in California. So we are going to jump back slightly to, you know, before the dating game show was aired. So it's November the 9th of 1977, and the disposed body of 18-year-old Jill Terry Barcombe from Oneida, New York, would be found on a dirt path near Mulholland Drive. Jill, she had been bound like knee to chest, so her knees were literally up to her chest, and she was naked from the waist down. Jill had been strangled with a set of blue rope ties. She had also been sexually assaulted and beaten. It was also discovered that on Jill's right breast she had received 3 bite marks from whoever it was that had attacked and murdered her. At first, the police believed that Jill might have been a victim of the Hillside Strangler, but of course this would be quickly ruled out. And then on December the 16th of 1977, 27-year-old Georgia Marie Wickstead, she was found dead in her Malibu apartment. Georgia had last been seen when she had drove a fellow nurse, Barbara Gale, home from a bar one night. But she drops Barbara off and then she heads home. However, the next day she doesn't show up for work, which is really, really strange for her, and Barbara, amongst other colleagues, are immediately concerned. So her co-workers are so concerned that they decide the best thing to do is report her missing and request the police go to her apartment and see if she's there. Now, when the police head over, they force their way into Georgia's apartment and they would find her dead, posed naked on her bedroom floor. She had been strangled with her own nylons, her skull had been bashed in, she had been brutally beaten, sexually assaulted, and her genitals had been mutilated. From the scene of this crime, there would be DNA evidence and also a handprint that would later be used to convict Alcala. But of course, we're going to get there when we get there. On June the 24th of 1978, 31-year-old Charlotte Lee Lamb from Santa Monica, she would be found dead in the laundry room of her apartment complex where she had been living in El Segundo. Devastatingly, Charlotte, she had been sexually assaulted, she had been brutally beaten, and she had been strangled to death by a shoelace. And her body had also been posed suggestively, and Alcala's DNA would actually be left at this scene as well. He's getting very sloppy. Thank God. So then on February the 14th of 1979, 15-year-old Monique Hoyt, she would be picked up by Rodney Alcala, driven back to his apartment, where he proceeded to brutally rape her. After brutally raping Monique, he then took her to a secluded, mountainous area in Joshua Tree, California. Now, the reason that he had brought Monique here was because he wanted to fulfill his sick desires and take photos of Monique in complete terror. And then he would also take photos whilst he was raping Monique again. After this, Alcala, he then bounds and gags Monique and he begins a sustained evil assault on her where he proceeds to repeatedly rape her and sodomise her. When he's done doing this, he takes a rock and brutally bludgeons Monique's head with it. And somehow this 15-year-old girl is such a fighter, she survived this horrific ordeal. And when Alcala went into a gas station, Monique made a run for it and she was able to file a police report. And I do not even know how this happened, but somehow Alcala, once he was caught, he was actually released on bail, which his mother paid for him. How is bail an option here? Then on June the 13th of 1979, 21-year-old Jill Marie Peranto, she would leave work early to attend a baseball game. Now the next day rolls around and she didn't turn up for work, and like many others in this case, her co-workers were very concerned because this was just so unlike her. So the police, they head over to Jill's apartment in Burbank and they discovered what they believed was forced entry. And devastatingly, inside that apartment, Jill would be found dead in her bathroom. She was posed sexually with pillows propped under her shoulder, and she had been sexually assaulted and beaten. Police, they found traces of blood at the crime scene because Alcala, the greasy-haired monster that he is, he's a bit clumsy and he cut himself whilst climbing through the window. And later on, once Alcala would be identified as Jill's killer, her friend came forward and said they had met Alcala multiple times at a club on nights out. It just shows you never know who you're surrounded by. And then on June the 20th of 1979, 12-year-old Robin Christine Samso, she would disappear from Huntington Beach in California on her way to her ballet class. Now, Robin's friends, they had later confirmed that whilst they were at the beach, a strange man, Alcala, and he asked these young children if they would like to do a photo shoot. Now, they all declined, including 12-year-old Robin, and they all start to sort of leave, go their separate ways. Robin has to get to ballet class, and at this point she's really worried that she might be late, so she borrows one of her friend's bikes in order to get there on time. But Robin would never make it to her ballet class. Devastatingly, it is thought that at some point between the beach and her ballet class, she was abducted. A lot of people believe that Alcala had offered her a ride to her ballet class so she wouldn't be late. And just 12 days later, a park ranger, they would come across the scattered and ravaged remains of Robin Samso. It was very clear that Robin's body had been ravaged by wild animals, and her body was found in the Pasadena foothills in Sierra Madre. Police, they interview and talk to Robin's friends. They're trying to get as much information as they possibly can to try and catch the person who had killed her. Now, her friends, they remember a lot of details about the stranger who approached them on the beach. So they provide these details to the police, and a police sketch artist is able to create a composite sketch. And this sketch would be very, very accurate. And this sketch ended up being so accurate and so detailed that Alcala's former parole officer immediately recognised him. So now I'm just going to give it a little try of adding a little Halloween aspect to this makeup. But basically, so the police, they are very much aware of Alcala's criminal past and the kind of crimes that he commits. And they believe this could be our guy. This would only further be solidified when they found an earring belonging to Robin Samso in a Seattle storage locker that Alcala was renting in his name. And when they found this, the police were very, very, very confident that they had their man. So in July of 1979, Alcala, he would be arrested without bail Finally, someone's talking sense here, no bail. And he would then be put on trial for Robin Samso's murder, and he would be sentenced to death in May of 1980. And I wish it was that simple, but it's not. We're going to go around the hills here. So this verdict, it would actually be overturned by the California Supreme Court. Now, the reason for this was apparently the jurors had been misinformed of Alcala's previous criminal convictions. You know, they bring them up to speed, they do a second trial, and he would again be sentenced to death in August of 1980. So then, in 1992, the California Supreme Court, they upheld the conviction. However, Alcala, he would then file a habeas corpus petition. Like, mate, go and just accept your fate. Like, you're going to death. Just live with it, okay? Or, you know, die with it. But still, just give it up. So with this, in 2001, a United States District Court judge, they granted this and overturned his conviction. And I just need to ask, was that judge, was it a family member, a relative? Because who's overturning that? Whilst they're preparing for a third prosecution in 2003, an Orange County investigator had learned that Alcala's DNA, sampled under a new state law due to his objections, matched the semen left at the rape murder scenes of 2 victims. Now, additional evidence, including a cold case DNA match in 2004, would lead to Alcala's indictment for an additional 4 murders of young women. Now, these young women were Jill Barcombe, Georgia Wickstead, Charlotte Lamb, and Jill Parantu. Now, as we know, all of these young women, they had all been posed very sexually in these carefully chosen poses. Now, there had also been another pair of earrings found in Alcala's Seattle storage locker, and these matched the DNA of Charlotte Lamb. As all these weirdos seem to do, whilst in prison, Alcala would write a book himself, about himself, and it was called You, the Jury. Now, in this book, he had basically claimed that he was innocent of the murder of Robin. Like, ridiculous considering there is DNA evidence, but like, pop off. And also, whilst he was in prison, he had the absolute cheek to file 2 lawsuits against the California penal system for a slip and fall incident, and also because they failed to provide him with a low-fat diet. Okay, Diva. What? Like, no. Why do you think that you can do that? I just... doesn't make sense. I was mad because the slip and fall accident that occurred, I wish hadn't actually been an accident at all, and I wish that his neck had been snapped. But that's just me. So in 2003, the prosecution, they would enter a motion that requested that the Robin Samso charges and then the 4 additional charges of murder of these 4 other women, they should be joined together. Now, of course, Alcala's defence, they contested this, and their reason was because, you know, 1 murder, the jury could find reasonable doubt and therefore not convict him. But, you know, add on an additional 4 and make that an even 5, it's going to be really hard for the jury to find reasonable doubt. I think that might be the point. Like, you know, if you are guilty of these charges or you are believed to have committed these crimes, then they should all be put in front of a jury for them to make up their mind. Like, when I read that, I was like, seriously? And luckily, in 2006, the Californian Supreme Court, they would side with the prosecution, and in 2010, Alcala would finally stand trial for the murder of 5 women. So Alcala, for his 3rd trial, he decides that he is just going to ride Han Solo. He would like to act in his own defence. Personally, I love when they do this because, well, how dumb can you be? Now, Alcala, he would spend hours, and I mean like 5 hours, asking himself questions and answering them himself. Like, he would address himself as Mr. Alcala, he would ask the questions in this, like, deep voice, and then he would provide an answer to his own questions in his normal voice. like there was two of them there. Alcala, he would tell the jury that he was actually at Knott's Berry Farm applying for a photography job at the time that Robin Samsoe had disappeared and been abducted. Now, he was trying really hard to persuade the jury that he was not guilty of Robin Samsoe's murder. The other 4 convictions, like, he never really defended that much. He just kind of said like, oh, I don't remember killing them. I think my spider needs to go on a diet because I've done some of his legs a bit fat, but like, no body shaming here. Now, there would be a surprise witness who would make an appearance at this trial to testify, and that was no one other than Tali Shapiro. She was now 50 years old at this point, but she was here to make sure that those young women got the justice that they deserved. And she would be there to witness this monster finally be convicted of his crimes. So in March of 2010, Alcala would be convicted for the 3rd time and he would be sentenced to death yet again. And then in January of 2011, Alcala would be indicted for the murders of Elaine Hover and Cornelia Crilly. So in June of 2012, he would be extradited to New York to enter his plea, and originally he pled not guilty, of course he did, but then in December of 2012 he would change this plea to guilty. So whilst awaiting execution on California's death row, Rodney Alcala would pass away at the age of 77 from natural causes, which honestly just boils my blood because like, these people just seem to get off so easy sometimes when they have made so many suffer. It infuriates me on an entirely different level. And he didn't even die that long ago. It was 1:43 a.m. on July the 24th of 2021. Now, 120 of Alcala's, photographs of these young men and young women who were naked, they would be released to the public to try and help identify other victims. 21 women would come forward identifying themselves from the photos, and 6 families would come forward to identify a loved one who disappeared and was never found again. In 2021, 68-year-old Morgan Rowan, she came forward to the police and she described being attacked by Alcala in 1968 when she was just 16 years old. In March of 2011, the police had announced that they were more than certain that Alcala had also been responsible for the 1977 murder of 19-year-old Pamela Jean Lamson. She had disappeared after heading off to meet a man who was going to take her photograph. In September of 2016, Alcala would be charged with the murder of 28-year-old Christine Ruth Thornton. She had been one of the women that Alcala had photographed before she disappeared. And Christine's body hadn't even been identified until 2015 when Christine's relatives had given DNA samples which then matched the DNA of the tissue of her remains. Now I'm just going to read out the last ones here just because I do have it in like a list form and I don't want to miss anyone. So Rodney Alcala, he was also linked to the murders of 20-year-old Cherry Ann Greenman who disappeared in 1976. 13-year-old Antoinette Jean Whitaker, who disappeared with an unidentified man on the night of July 1977, and also 17-year-old Joyce Francine Gaunt, who was last seen going to meet an unidentified man on February the 16th of 1978. And honestly, who knows just how many more women fell victim to Rodney Alcala. But my loves, that is it for another true crime and makeup episode. I really hope you found this one interesting. It has been so highly requested, especially since Netflix released that Woman of the Hour TV show. Sorry, I just keep saying that. I keep getting black lipstick on my teeth. What do we think of the wee like spooky spider makeup look? Usually I would take like 8 hours doing a makeup look like this, but I had to rush it today, so it's not my best, but it's not my worst, so it's alright. If you do enjoy true crime and makeup, please make sure you are subscribed with the notification bell on because I am here for you every single Wednesday and Sunday at 7:30 p.m. British Standard Time. Any details of what I've used on my face today, my social media handles and my case suggestion form, they will all be linked in the description down below. But that is it for today's video. I really hope you enjoyed. Please, please, please remember, be a good person. Do not be a bad person. Stay safe. Look after each other. Have a happy Halloween and I will see you in the next one. Bye!